It's football and other F words. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on Twitter/X at FWordsPod. And of course, we have Stoney Keeley. You can follow him on Twitter/X at Stoney Keeley. SoBrosNetwork.com, StackingTheInbox.com. Not promoting PaulKarski.com, even though that is kind of promoting PaulKarski.com because Mike's not here. He didn't tell us why. He just said he wasn't fucking showing up to work this week and gave us no reason. And you know what? We just let him have it because who knows what's going on in Mike's life. Probably having, work travels. Maybe his kid is slamming people through steel cages at daycare. We don't know what's going on with Mike, but he is not here for this episode. But that's all right. We got a lot to get to. I don't know if it's phase 1 or phase 2 of the offseason program has wrapped up for the Tennessee Titans, and they are heading to summer break. But we got that to talk about. We're going to do a deep dive, continue our series into positional groups, and do a deep dive into the offensive line. I do hate that Mike is at least missing that because he has laid out some good foundation for things for us to talk about. And, of course, we're brought to you by Bluegrass Beverages of Hendersonville, Tennessee. Over 50 years of service. You can get all your party supplies that you need. Doesn't matter if it's for 4th of July, birthdays. It doesn't matter. Bluegrass Beverages. Wine, liquor, beer, hemp drinks. Is that what they're called? Hemp drinks? CBD drinks? Mocktails, cocktails. They got everything you could need over at Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. And of course, we're going to call this the Bluegrass Chat, the BG chat room. If you want to get into the Bluegrass Chat down here, put in some conversations. We'll answer some questions and all that kind of stuff. And it's the best time of the week for podcasts. Donnie D right there. Justin Belcher says, "What a badass." I'm assuming that he's talking about the kids. Mike's child who has been in many kerfuffles at daycare.
I thought he was talking about us.
I don't know. He only said badass. So,
well, I'm left cheek, you're right cheek. Collectively, we are one pretty badass.
Does that make Mike the butthole?
Mike's the crack.
Mike is the crack. All right. Let's talk about OTA's minicamp. It's all done. Next time we'll see the Tennessee Titans on the practice field. We'll be at training camp, which is July 23rd. So got a long few weeks ahead of us, a dead period. Yeah. Gonna have to be creative. Of course, we already got our content planned out. Mike is the taint, according to D Good. So there you go, Mike. You're listening. But the pressers were yesterday. I thought it started off really well. Shows Brian Callahan's humor, teasing PK for being out on the beach, which is his second beach vacation in like a span of a month and a half. So good for PK.
Living life.
Living life, loving it. But it was funny to see Brian Callahan kind of poke fun at all the conversations. Is he inside the building training and all that kind of stuff? So good on him.
Also, he's joking about it, but at the same time, he's letting the media know, hey, I'm watching you guys. You guys. So I don't know. It would have made me feel a little uneasy. Like, oh, we're all laughing about this, but what happens if you get too many unexcused absences? Is that when
what happens when you can't catch a football that's thrown to you, right? I mean, like the media, he's got his eye on the media. He is scouting the media at every practice. He's probably a secret camera set up, and they go into the meeting rooms, and then after they're talking about all the practice stuff, for a fun little skit for the like a wind down, they break down, Easton. I wonder if they did break down Easton's film.
Supposedly, Easton says that they've got the all-22 from it because all of their practice is on all-22. But I don't know. It still hasn't seen the light of day. I hope that it comes out at some point this summer.
Maybe I can put a word into Nate Bain that we need to see the footage.
Yes,
maybe make it an F-Words exclusive. See if I can't get that done.
We got 8 weeks or so until training camp starts. It's going to be a dry period for content. This feels like the perfect thing to put out there in the middle of this dead zone and get people talking. And I'm also surprised. Surprised they didn't like throw Easton in the lake or something. The way that sounds like the reaction, a lot of boos in that on that field. Oof, tough scene.
He did catch the second ball that was thrown to him by future UFL quarterback Malik Willis.
Well,
so that was an easier ball to catch.
Hold on. By that logic, did Malik Willis have a better practice than Will Levis? Does Malik Willis throw a more catchable ball than Will
Well, we
Levis.
don't know if Malik Willis doesn't catchable ball. But we don't know if maybe this was like just a lob, to
Oh, yeah. True.
it's just a toss. So we'll have to see. So let's talk about the closing of mandatory mini camps and OTAs and all that jazz. Yesterday they talked about joint practices. They talked about what they are doing as far as plans. They
Love
talked
it.
about the offensive line. They talked about a lot of the right guards are trying to do stuff at center, right? I mean, they're getting reps at center. They're trying to figure out that whole thing. They're talking about NPF learning in the classroom. They're talking about all this stuff. And we've talked about it on a football show with Easton. I talked about, how the vibes are impossibly high. Well, the only way the vibes can continue to be high is if everybody goes and does their job during the summer.
Sure.
But what topic like yesterday, out of all these topics, you got Tyke Tolbert calling out Trevor Maddich. You got all these topics. What topic from yesterday's information interested you the most?
Well, it was the offensive line. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody that's listening to the show or watching along. It stood out to me because, like, you kind of feel like this sense of optimism with this group is just gaining momentum throughout the summer, because every time we hear about JC Latham or Peter Skoronski or Lloyd Cushenberry, they're talking about him in glowing fashion. And JC just seems to be getting better, and they're having to like pull his ass off the field. He's getting rained on. It's a thunderstorm outside, and he's still out there working. I haven't gotten tired of hearing any JC Latham update that I can get, and I love it. But particularly from yesterday's media availability, I don't know if we've talked about this before this offseason, but Bill Callahan kind of slipped a little nugget there that I don't recall us talking about. But he actually said that they're cross-training all of the guards on center right now. I know there are a lot of folks out there that seem to think that a veteran center is still an option for them to add ahead of training camp, but I kind of feel like the answer's in-house. And looking at guys that we've talked about, like Daniel Brunskill, finding a home as the backup center is a possibility. But even a guy like Cole Spencer, that we've said, really talented, undrafted kid, they paid him a high signing bonus as an undrafted free agent. Left guard, probably not going to get a shot there unless something happens to Big Meat Pete, to Peter Skoronski. So where can you utilize his athleticism? Well, if they're cross-training all the guards on center, he could be a potential option there. So it kind of opened up the airwaves a little bit, started to think about the possibilities that they have. And something you alluded to in your piece for Stacking the Inbox this morning is that there's not only a bit of depth to this offensive line, but the guys that they have are versatile, and their coaching versatility in them. And to me, that was the big takeaway, just in a little nugget, a little throwaway line almost. Bill Callahan's like, oh yeah, we cross-train all the guards on playing center. And I'm kind of like, whoa, hold up. This is new information to me. And I've been chewing on it ever since.
Yeah, to me, it makes sense, right? I mean, we know that Dylan Radins has gotten some run at center at prior Tennessee Titans training camps and all that kind of stuff. I mean, so it kind of makes sense to train all these people and avoid having to go sign a center, because I don't really think you
Yeah,
have to.
I don't either.
At this point, there's really no point in it into not having cross-train guys, and that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later about the depth of this offensive line. But I thought that was an interesting nugget. I thought the nugget about, NPF is doing wonders in the classroom, which is to be expected because NPF is generally a pretty smart guy. His vocabulary is very high. That's one of the first things that everybody kind of noticed about him in his interview after he got drafted was his massive vocabulary, using words that a lot of people don't even know the meaning to. And so I'm not surprised that he is shining in the classroom, but there's a big difference between taking what you learned out in the classroom for a guy like NPF and putting it into practice. And again, we'll be talking more about the offensive line, but I did think that was interesting for people who think, and I will say this, talking about Tavondre Sweat in the same light, everybody's kind of said, just because they're not working out here does not mean they're not working in there. And I think that's something that we've talked about Tavondre Sweat, is that it does not mean that he's sitting on his ass just looking out through a window, like Squidward watching everybody else play. He's actually doing stuff inside the building, not just classwork either. He's doing stuff with the training staff because the people that you're doing classwork with are out in the field. So you're doing stuff with the training staff, you're training and all that kind of stuff. Yesterday, obviously, about 30 people were not at the last day of voluntary OTAs. And of course, today they've canceled OTA work, but they're doing a group outing somewhere.
Dave and Buster's, I bet.
There you go. Maybe I should be heading to Dave and Buster's after we get off this.
Everybody loves Dave and Buster's.
Everybody loves Dave and Buster's. But at the end of the day, I'm not surprised that there was a huge absentee list yesterday. I thought that the information about if he could schedule joint practices 3 times, which each team that they're playing in the preseason game, he would.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an interesting take in today's NFL, just because about how the NFLPA and the teams have kind of constructed the offseason to lessen the strain of practices, to make practices easier. And here he is, a coach who says that he thinks that most players love joint practices. And I could see why, right?
Absolutely.
It's something new. It's something fresh. You're going up against competition you may not see through against your own team and different looks and all this stuff. It's better preparation. But it's also, I feel like, a little bit more physical, right? I mean, I know Eldon does not want to talk about Traylon Burks, but you got to remember last year's joint practice. And I'm getting this. There is no big Traylon Burks discourse to be had. But I'm just saying, as an example of a joint practice being maybe too extreme physical, that's an example you can easily point to, even though it wasn't because anybody was on him or touching him. It's just kind of he pulled a hamstring. So it just maybe sometimes it can lead to unnecessary reps or anything, but I did find it interesting. What are your thoughts on? I would love more joint practices. What are your thoughts on his take on joint practices?
I love it as well. And I think when you look at the dredges of the summer training camp, like after a certain point, don't you think going up against the same guys every day, the competitive spirit kind of fades a little bit, right? Like you get to know these guys, you inherently like them. When a new team comes to town, all of a sudden it's like, hey, that competitive spirit's kind of rekindled a little bit. And I think that's sort of the secret to ramping up the intensity in these joint practices. I think it's also a chance to get in front of a different personnel group and look at a different system, a different set of players. And no, it's not like, Mike McDonald's going to have Seattle come into town running the 2-minute drive that would win them the Super Bowl in February. Like they're not going to tip their hands that much, but it is an opportunity to kind of break up the monotony of going up against your own team, your own scheme, your own personnel over and over and over. And I think by virtue of just having a different opponent, you kind of naturally, you feel that competitive spirit kind of boil up again. And I think when the team needs it the most, the deeper they get into training camp, that's when you see these joint practices and things are ratcheted up quite a bit. So I'm a fan of it. I also really love the Seahawks being the team that are going to come to Nashville, because I think there are so many matchups within the matchup that I think it's going to be a really good gauge of where this team's at. And we can get into that a little bit if you want to, unless you had some thoughts on the joint practice concept.
I want to kind of do something real quick off that. And it's not, I just want to kind of change the narrative on something.
Okay.
Right. Like, I think when we talk about comparing teams to other NFL teams, specifically the talk around the AFC South is like, well, who has the best cornerback room? Who has the best wide receiver room? Stuff like that. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Shouldn't we be looking at what cornerback room can match up the best and have the competitive advantage to every wide receiver room? And this kind of goes into what you're talking about in the matchups of, like, you got JSN, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf going up against your top 3 corners, right?
Yeah, sure.
So in my mind, isn't that the better way to look at it? Like, who is the better team? Well, who's going to win the matchups? Because your quarterbacks aren't going up against your cornerbacks, right? Like, if
Right.
you're trying to say that the Colts are better than the Tennessee Titans or the Tennessee Titans are better than the Colts, you should be comparing the cornerback room to their wide receiver room. Who's going to win that
Absolutely.
matchup? Who's going to win the matchup in the trenches? And it's not just because that maybe they have the better offensive line doesn't really make them doesn't matter if you have the better defensive line, if you have the better pass rush. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
just think that
absolutely.
we could talk a little bit more intelligently about these matchups. So then that's what your Seahawks thing sparked up a little bit on me. But I do think the Seahawks are a great matchup. You talk about Mike McDonald, his defense has given fits to Brian Callahan. It's probably why
Yeah.
they at least tried to schedule that one up out of the three that they had. I think that's perfect. I think that's great. I do like that you're throwing Will Levis against one of the best defensive minded, head coaches against a pretty veteran, deep defense that is going to give him fits, and that's what you need. You
Man.
need to not make it easy for Will Levis, and surely this defense for the Tennessee Titans and their scrimmages and 11s on 11s and 7-on-7s, they won't either. I mean, they're already cussing him out, trash talking him, and forcing him to, celebrate NWI touchdowns. So they're not going to go easy on him either. But that's the whole point. You want it to be as difficult for your players. You want iron sharpens iron. It's not
Yeah.
iron sharpens paper or paper sharpens iron or whatever you want to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm all for it. Really love it. Another thing that Brian Callahan talked about was the offseason plan. And we have talked about this a lot, that this summer break is so important for so many players this year. Um, it's important for Will Levis, and of course, he's already taking steps. He has a game plan. He has a plan that his quarterback guru coach that he has personally hired is getting with their offensive staff to figure out what he needs to do and tailor that. He's taking mental health breaks by going to visit his family. He's going to be with the wide receivers. But there's other guys like Tavondre Sweat, right? Like Tavondre Sweat is a guy that is super important too. It's super important for JC Latham to keep the momentum going. Certain players that built up momentum, Gabe Judy Lolly, no days off for GJL, right? Like
Yeah.
GJL has to keep it going. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Cedric Gray, all
Thomas
these
Rush.
guys, they need to take some personal time, right? Thomas Rush is a good one. To
Yeah.
take some personal time. It's very important to kind of recharge. Blaine Bishop said on his show that he would recommend take a week off. The first week, take it off. Okay. Do your training, do your workouts, but as far as lifting weights and conditioning, stuff like that, but take the week off. Recharge, refresh. Then keep it going for the rest of 4 weeks. Be hardcore training for football, because most of these guys on this team have been hardcore training for the combine. So I'm not really going to ask you, what is your thoughts of like, what does the plan look like and all that kind of stuff. But who do you think has the most? Give me the top 3 people who have the most important summer break ahead of them.
Man, I would start with Will Levis because it's going to be a big year for him. All eyes are on him at the quarterback position. It's not one of those spots where you can really dilly-dally around, and I think approaching the week off as a way to better mental health, to rest a little more, to recharge is the right attitude to take. Like you get away from football for a little bit, you're hazing the barn as far as the spring goes. You reset, you recharge, you refocus on the summer. I would go with Tavondre Sweat as well. Like he's got to, at this point, he's got to get healthy. He's got to get healthy, because the thing we keep saying on all these shows across the Fine 440 network is that, well, it's fine now, but if we get into July and we're still seeing these issues, then maybe you start to worry a little bit about him. And man, I think he's going to be a big factor on this defensive line next to Jeffrey Simmons. I think if they can achieve their potential as a duo, this is going to be a fearsome defensive front to deal with. And it starts with him just getting healthy enough to get on the field. And then I would also add JC Latham to the conversation as well. Those would be my top 3, because he's filling such an important hole that we saw the ill effects of it going disastrously in 2023. There's an amount of pressure on this guy to come in right away and fortify that left tackle spot. So far, he's checked all the boxes, right? We keep hearing all this good stuff about him, but he's got to keep it going because this is an integral part of the rebuild, so to speak, that you get the offensive line right, it can unlock so many things for this offense that I think it does put a little bit of pressure on JC Latham's shoulders to keep that going, to keep the hype train going, to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, Tavondre Sweat definitely for me is at the top of the list because he's just got a lot of he has a lot of general questions about him. I mean,
Sure.
I can say that I am not concerned, but objectively, you look at a guy like Tavondre Sweat, tons of questions. I look at a guy like JC Latham, and I agree, carrying the momentum. JC Latham, I'm not worried about him carrying the momentum, and we're not really doing the worry game here. But I do agree, a guy that has already been working on his fundamentals at left tackle before he even got drafted, and now is a left tackle. Speaking of which, Talisi Fuanka is being moved to left tackle.
So
And
long
I don't
Trevor
know if
Penning.
you've heard that. Yeah,
I
so
did. Yeah.
so that's something I saw today. But JC Latham's making the switch. He's got a lot that he's got to do. I'm not worried about his strength or anything like that, or his conditioning or his work ethic. But I mean, there is stuff that he probably wants to heavily focus on. I would love to see him at O-line masterminds at some point during the summer. So that would be freaking fantastic, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be fantastic content?
That would be. Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah. And I agree, I Will Levis, but that's also the part of being the quarterback, right? A quarterback with questions surrounding, who you are and everything. I mean, you talk about Anthony Richardson, everybody's like they got all the answers for Anthony Richardson. He's having trouble even throwing at OTAs and minicamp. So
fair enough.
And he's played less games. Like I just don't understand. And I love Anthony Richardson, but I do not understand. It's just more confirmation bias from pre-draft evaluations. Because you look at a guy like Nate Tice, who just put out a really good article over Yahoo about Will Levis, but he just recently watched all the games about Will Levis. So if he had any tape about Will Levis before now, between the end of the regular season before now about Will Levis, those takes are just kind of like trash, right? Because he never watched the games.
Yeah.
Like,
and
I don't know if he did. I'm not saying that he did, but I'm just saying that's why I feel like where the national media kind of lacks a little perspective is that I don't think they're watching not necessarily just Titans games. I just don't think they're watching games in general. They're watching highlights. Like that's what I kind of feel like they're doing.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get off on a tangent on that.
I'm biting my tongue right now, or else we're gonna go down that wormhole.
There's some big news that came out of the competitive world yesterday, and I want to get your take on it.
Okay.
The MLE, the Major League Eating, has decided to ban Joey Chestnut from competing in the July 4th hot dog eating contest by Nathan's Hot Dogs. So Nathan's has decided to ban him from the event.
Yeah,
I stand with Nathan's because how dare he sign with obviously Satan's vegan company?
That's
it's
right.
there in the name.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. Morningstar. That is Lucifer's last name. That is clearly polluting the vegan world and polluting all the world. And listen, he got $1 million. So guess what? You don't get your $200,000 for competing in this competition. You're still $800K richer than what you would have been. So I'm all for that part. Go get your money.
So,
but if you are going to promote vegan food as a competitive eater who does not eat, like, does he have a celery eating record? I'm sorry. I side with Nathan's.
What if Morningstar tries to trot out a celery eating contest on the 4th of July now? Are you watching?
I'd watch it, but that would be, I bet, disgusting. That may be more disgusting than the hot dog one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Like, this is kind of a slap in the face to Nathan's, and they have every right to stand their ground. And I'm perfectly
it's about the integrity
fine with
of the sport, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it is. But I also, man, it does kind of make the event itself suffer because no matter who wins this Nathan's hot dog eating contest, they're going to be called the paper champion because Joey Chestnut wasn't there competing. And that's the thing that I hate about it, is that somebody's going to win this tournament, this contest, and they're just going to be, kind of swept under the rug. Like, this is a nothing champion. We know who the real champion is. He's competing in the celery eating contest today. And I don't think that's fair to the guy that's going to win this thing.
Vegans have no place in the major league of eating, the eating sports world. They really don't have a place in society, in my opinion, but that's just me.
I like some vegan food.
I mean, you can like vegan food, but I don't like vegans. And I think that's the difference.
I also, for what it's worth, have the palate of a raccoon. So
yeah,
I'll eat anything.
And it's not about sponsorships or anything. It's about winning. It's about keeping the integrity of what makes America great.
Yeah.
That does not include vegans. It includes shoveling hot dogs down your throat. Not
down
these
your
little
gullet.
Impossible burger patties or whatever. I mean, let's be real. It's 4th of July, and if someone came and asked me to put a veggie burger on the grill with all my meat, I would say just go throw it in the fucking microwave at home, not my house. Because I don't have any place for it. I just don't have any place for it in my life, and so I side with Nathan's. It's about the integrity.
I'm deep throating glizzies all day on the 4th of July. The real thing.
Speaking of meat, let's talk about the offensive line, and we're going to get into the offensive line. We're not going to do advanced metrics.
Okay.
Because here's why. We did a video that is over at stackinginbox.com. By the way, when Jarrell Casey turned vegan, he got worse. So just want to throw that out there.
Oh, how about that?
Either way. But if you want advanced metrics about the run game, the offensive line, go to stackinginbox.com, watch our deep dive on the run scheme and the rushing attack. That was put out on Monday. It's available for you right now. And if you want advanced metrics for the individual players or projections, there's an article that is out, Stacking the Inbox today on Wednesday, that I wrote a deep dive on that. Okay. But let's talk about where the Titans rank, because I was pretty surprised that the Titans, and I guess it kind of does make sense when you start thinking about the contracts, but you think about Lloyd Cushenberry, right? He just got paid a lot of this money. So I think that kind of like infiltrated my mind a little bit.
Sure.
But they are 31st in the league in cap hit spent on the offensive line at $31.5 million. So 31st, so that's pretty good. Yet they are 13th in cash spending. So in this year, they are spending the 13th most in cash. So 31st in cap hit at 31.5, but the 13th most in cash spending at $52.9 million. And they have now that they have signed Jerron Christian, 16 players under contract play for the offensive line. So that is we know at least 6 of those guys ain't making the team.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We'll talk about that all later. But I just thought that was interesting that now that they have brought in Jerron Christian, let's start off with Jerron Christian.
Okay.
He has been signed. He has spent the majority of his time at left tackle. Now, interesting fact that I did not know, but since 2008, teams that Bill Callahan have been on have only drafted offensive tackles 4 times. 4 times. Now, they have drafted a lot of offensive tackles that immediately went to guard. So that's telling you that they didn't think they were an offensive tackle. We're talking about 4 drafted offensive tackles. So he hasn't really developed a lot of offensive tackles, which it does not mean anything, right? Because we know that he has taken offensive tackles game to the next level regardless. But I just thought that was an interesting tidbit. Jerron Christian is one of those guys. And he has played the majority at left tackle. We know that Leroy Watson has been the second team left tackle at times during camp. So I ask you, the signing of Jerron Christian, good depth piece, but why Jerron Christian if you have Leroy Watson? Is this just to push Leroy Watson because he's not maybe performing where you want him to after you traded a 7th round pick that I said was silly to begin with?
Yeah, and I mean, look, Christian played meaningful snaps down the stretch for the Browns with the rash of injuries that they dealt with. I didn't think he was particularly good, which we talked about in the video that we did on Monday. The Browns kind of shifted to more inside zone interior runs behind the guards because the tackle depth was a clear issue. For me, I kind of look at the dominoes and where we're beginning to see them fall. And it seems from the press conferences that we're pretty locked into a John Ajukwu, NPF, Jalen Duncan battle for right tackle. They move Leroy Watson over to left tackle where he's serving in the backup second team role. And I don't know who is really beyond he and JC Latham at the left tackle spot right now. So you add a guy like Jerron Christian, I think you could be right. Maybe Watson, if you thought when you traded for him that he could come in and compete for the right tackle spot, but you see pretty quickly that he's not up to snuff, or maybe you just needed him at left tackle, whatever the reason for the switch was. And maybe he's not winning the job, commanding the position the way you thought that he would. You bring in a guy like Jerron Christian to push him. Maybe that's part of it. I think it could also be a numbers game. Like they're trying to completely rebuild this offensive line, and it's not just a starting lineup thing. Like they're trying to add new depth pieces that are more suited for more gap runs and power and stuff like that. And so maybe they just want to be 3 deep at each tackle position to see which 2 guys come out of each pile, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't think it really. I mean, it doesn't really say too much other than they need depth. But
Sure.
something that we rarely talk about is that, okay, do they need specific left tackle depth? Because I guess it considers, because most of your right tackles are
Yeah.
guys that can play left tackle.
Yeah.
So, Jalen Duncan could be over there. So maybe it's more about Jalen Duncan's status than it is about
Oh,
Leroy
don't start
Watson's
that.
status. And
My
I'm
heart
calling
can't
him
take it.
Leroy, by the way, because he only has one E in his name. If you want to
Yeah.
be called Leroy, you got to have 2 E's.
If
That's how it
JC
works.
if JC Latham is the trench king, then his backup is the tongue king. How about that?
Oh, no, do not like that at all.
Don't like it? Well, I
No,
mean, look at
Tongue King?
the tongue king. Haven't you seen the clip of him licking his teeth on Twitter?
Oh, well, I get okay. Yeah, okay. I
The
get it
tongue
now.
king.
I just thought there was some sexual innuendo there.
No. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what
Um,
that tongue do.
But at the end of the day, this team obviously still wants to hammer out the depth. And
Yeah.
let's talk about the depth of this offensive line in general, because I look at it and I'm like, when I'm going through the list and thinking of everything that all these players can do, right? You have all these guards training to be center. You have guards that are on the right side. You have Daniel Brunskill, who could play 3 spots on the entire right side and
Wherever
probably
you
play
need
left
him.
guard too. You
Yeah.
got Dylan Radins, who has experience at multiple spots. You got NPF, who has experience on both sides of the line. Jalen Duncan, who's getting experience on. To me, I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, this is probably the best top to bottom from player number 1 to player 15,
Yeah.
16
Yeah.
of depth at the offensive line the Tennessee Titans have had in a long time. It may not be the best starting 5, but I'm talking about the best overall depth. And it's hard not to love, because a lot of people have talked about, well, you can't reshape the entire offensive line room. Well,
Yeah.
they've done a pretty damn good job of it.
They have
And
16
maybe
guys.
it's not as drastic on the top 5. Like I said, the starting 5 may not be as drastic as John Robinson's first year, but it's kind of something that I kind of pushed back on in that narrative was like, well, John Robinson did it. We've seen other teams do it. Tennessee Titans can do it. The only difference is right now with the Tennessee Titans is that they're Quentin Spain. They're, Josh Klein is at right
Yeah.
tackle.
Yeah.
So like that's
Mhm.
kind of where it's where it's at. It's like those guys that you're kind of unsure on if they are NFL starters is over there at right tackle. So at the end of the day, where are you at on this depth for this group?
I think this is the first time in a long time, several years, that I'm looking at it from top to bottom and thinking, man, there are some guys that aren't going to make the team because of a numbers issue that I really hope can land on the practice squad. I think about Cole Spencer. I I'm kind of as much as it pains me to say it, the writing on the wall is that I feel like Jalen Duncan's going to be pushed pretty far down the depth chart at this point, but still believe in the talent, the athleticism, that sort of thing. So looking at it from that standpoint, like they're training all these guys to do everything. They've got some talent, some athleticism, some skill, some power, a little bit of everything in that room. they are going to end up cutting guys that I think are going to make NFL rosters at some point in their career. And that's a good spot to be in. Now, we're not talking about having, a line full of all pro candidates out there. Like, there's still work to be done, and it's still pretty thin if something happens to JC Latham, Peter Skoronsky, or Lloyd Cushenberry. Like, we're kind of banking on those three guys being solid contributors in 2024. But shit, man, if something happens and one of those guys go down, then you're going on an intriguing developmental prospect and asking them to fill those shoes. So I think there is still a slippery slope with this, but man, just the numbers game looks pretty good to me in not just the sense of how many bodies they have, but also how many different things each of these guys can do, where they can fit along the offensive line. Even like a guy like John Ojukwu has right-left versatility. He played left tackle at Boise State. He's playing right tackle now. You can move him around. There were a lot of draft analysts that thought he'd slide into guard at the next level. I'm coming around on Sadiq Charles, and watching the Washington tape from a year ago, it kind of feels like, man, that was just the outhouse in the tornado right there, man. It was just all over the place. And Sadiq Charles made to look worse by the supporting cast, the guys around him, than I think he actually was. He's got some good tape. He had some. And
I just muted you while I was coughing. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I got the notification, was like, I'm just going to power through this and we'll figure it out on the back end. But Sadiq Charles has some quality tape. So if those three guys along from center to left tackle are as advertised, I think it's going to make Sadiq Charles look better. And then you're right. You've got the Josh Klein spot at right tackle. But man, the depth, the versatility of all these guys, the upgrades that they've made this offseason, it's really hard for me not to be optimistic about them being able to find like 6 quality guys, 6 real quality players, maybe even 7 out of this group.
Just real quick, I want to run through some questions.
Okay.
Ed Henry says, drafted in the first year with team or well into his tenure? I looked at every draft class while he was on staff. So with the I started with the Jets, then went to the Cowboys, then went to Jets, Cowboys, Washington, Browns. I think that was the correct order of operations there. So I went through from 2008, 2023, every individual draft class.
Yeah.
Zach Riley asks, has there ever been an O-line to get 3 Pro Bowlers in 1 year? Yes. Actually, just last year, Jason Kelsey, Landon Dickerson, and Lane Johnson all made the Pro Bowl off of Philadelphia. I'm sure there's years where Dallas had probably multiple. I would say there's probably multiple years with Philadelphia filled in multiple.
Man,
I know Dallas probably in their heyday had a couple in there, and I would
feel
say
I feel like Cleveland had one recently with both of the guards.
There may have been. They had 2
Conklin.
last year, so there may have been a year with Jack Conklin, Wyatt Teller, J.C. Treader, and Joel Patano. 3 of those 4 may have made it when one of Conklin's years. So yeah, there have been, and I think the Tennessee Titans have a good chance of having.
Why
3.
not?
We'll talk about that later. Which is going to be better this year for Justin Belcher, and I think this is a good segue into talking about run blocking and pass blocking and what to expect. Got a feeling this run game will be nasty, which in and of itself helps the passing game a shit ton. And it's from Justin Belcher. So
yeah,
let me say this. If you are solely a PFF guy, which I am not, but I do use their grades to provide an illustration because there's no good run game metric for offensive linemen that's readily available.
Sure.
So you have to take it with a grain of salt.
It's hard to evaluate.
But yes, a lot of the offensive line run games first year under Callahan, whether it be a rookie or whether it be one of the other positions like offensive tackle or guard, they kind of see a little drop in their run game quality. That to me doesn't really mean much because I feel like what we have seen from Cleveland, Nick Chubb's left a lot of yards on the field and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears will be better in a gap. So I think the run game will be more efficient. It's not going to have, a 2,000-yard rusher. It's not going to have a guy with 20 touchdowns. It's not going to have all this fancy stuff that you're used to seeing from Derrick Henry that you use to measure success. The box score stats are probably not going to tell you anything. The EPA, the success rate, the yards per attempt, the yards per touch, those things are going to be better. And that is a function of the run game and the running backs, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm with you.
Real quick, to answer his question on my end, I think the pass blocking will be considerably better than the past 2 years because the past 2 years have been terrible. So
Yes.
I do think the offensive line has a really good shot at being a top 10 unit as a whole, but specifically because of the pass blocking has been so improved.
Well, and there's an aspect of the pass blocking that people haven't really talked about a whole lot. You're getting these bigger, more powerful, pot-bellied guys, titty-waving guys out there, and it's like, oh, well, they're not athletic. Well, guess what? If you get somebody in space and they're trying to run down the middle on you, it's going to be a lot harder to push back a Sadiq Charles or a JC Latham than it would have been an Aaron Brewer or something like that. So I think it can help in pass protection just by the virtue of these guys getting bigger and stronger. So I'm cool with that. I like where Justin's head's at with that question, though. It's a switch I've kind of flipped within the last couple of weeks. We've started talking about it. I agree with you that I think this is probably going to be a highly efficient run game, a lot like the run games that Brian Callahan was a part of in Cincinnati when they had a couple of guys in the backfield and you'd look up and all of a sudden Joe Mixon has 1,000 yards on the season and it doesn't feel like he gets 5 carries in a game, that sort of deal. I think that's going to be the case for this Titans offense, but at the same time, I'm also optimistic enough that I won't be surprised if this is actually what you would consider a good run game. And that's what I keep kind of hammering the last few weeks is that this passing attack is going to be really exciting. And I don't blame anybody for getting caught up in the fireworks of all the ammunition they've added and the year 2 leap for Will Levis and all that stuff. But man, I think this is going to be a really fun team to watch running the football. And I'm not going to be surprised if they go out there. I mean, hell, I said it last week, like if both Pollard and Spears get 1,000 yards this season, get in the top 5 of the NFL rushing ranks, I'm not going to be surprised.
Which isn't hard.
Yeah, it's not.
Well, you talk about size, right? So size does matter because you're talking about going from Aaron Brewer to Lloyd Cushenberry, and there was a sizable strength, sizable size difference between the two. And what's interesting about when I was looking at the data, because yesterday when I had my article finished, I was kind of like, do I really need to write about Lloyd Cushenberry? Because doesn't everybody expect Lloyd Cushenberry to be really good?
Yeah, it's the guy.
And that woke up this morning, and I was like, okay, I'm writing about Lloyd Cushenberry. So that's why my article was a little late this morning. And I'm glad I did, because what I saw after comparing some of the guards in certain situations that Bill Callahan has coached, some of the offensive tackles and stuff like that, center sees the biggest jump. Okay. Center is the biggest beneficiary, statistically speaking, from Bill Callahan's presence, which is great to see, because what you're talking about is a guy like Lloyd Cushenberry, who, according to PFF's charting, only allowed 1 sack. Well, there have been 10 centers over the last 2 years that have allowed 0 sacks. So there is a good chance that, hey, even if he only allows 1, okay, let's just say he only allows 1, that's still a million times better. And what he brings to you, size, run game, and all that kind of stuff, I feel like we're always on the edge, always on the precipice of actually talking about Lloyd Cushenberry being really the best addition, right?
Yeah.
To this in this free agency class.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about guys they strictly signed and not guys they traded for, I think I would put Lloyd Cushenberry up there, because I think that Lloyd Cushenberry changes so much for Will Levis, this run game and passing game, that we need to just give him some flowers on the show. That Lloyd Cushenberry, I think, out of all the offensive linemen that we'll see, he'll have the biggest impact year 1 thanks to Bill Callahan. Like, there will be tangible year 1, immediate week 1, day 1 impact that we'll see on the field from Lloyd Cushenberry. And if I had to venture a guess, Lloyd Cushenberry is going to be one of the Pro Bowlers on this team. He's going to get his first Pro Bowl. And I think he's going to push for an all-pro spot this year. That's where I'm at with Lloyd Cushenberry.
I ain't going to push back on you for that one, Zach. I would also add, you know how a lot of this offseason we've spent talking about the tackles and how, well, you know, if you can just get somebody out there that you don't have to give tight end help to all the time and you free up a spot if you can trust that guy in a one-on-one situation. How much does it matter, in your opinion, to have a guy at center that you can put in those interior one-on-one matchups that you don't have to worry about trying to get the guard to kick over and help him a little bit because he can't really anchor and go blow for blow with a strong guy that has good foot drive, can run down the middle on you and blow your back out. That's not the right words, but you get what I'm saying. Blow you out of the block. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's better.
Yeah, there we go. But you're not having to put a guard over there and have the guard center double team on every play, you know? And I know I haven't done the tape study on this, but I've heard Dolphins people talking about how Brewer makes a lot more sense for them. They're going to run a lot more zone. And in a zone scheme, you do kind of use the athleticism to get out in space with leverage, or you use angles to create leverage. And so it's not as much about planting your feet in the dirt and standing your ground. And maybe he succeeds in that regard, but based on the Titan season last year, they needed a guy that was capable of doing that. Now, I think Cushenberry's athletic enough to get out there and pull on some of those plays when they're running a counter and all that stuff, and they're pulling two different people. But I also think an important distinction with him and how he improves the center spot compared to last season for the Titans is that he can hold his own in those one-on-one situations with a defensive tackle, free the guards up to do their thing, and it has that exponential effect on the interior protection for Will Levis, who should then theoretically have a little more time to go through his progressions, make his throws. And if your tackles are on the outside holding their own against the edge, man, you're cooking with gas at that point. Like, this is we've achieved the peak vision at this point.
I look at it this way. This is the best center situation they've had the last 2 seasons. Not to say anything bad about Ben Jones. I love Ben Jones, but Ben Jones couldn't stay healthy. He was fighting through injury. He was old. Like, I commend him for all that, but he had a rough year that year. He was still good, but now we're talking about getting back to the old Ben Jones days, you know, having a great center. The Kevin Mawai days is here where I'm at. I've seen a few people say this, and they've said this about multiple different players, but we're talking about offensive linemen today. I don't see how Daniel Brunskill is considered on the roster bubble. Is he going to be a starter? No. But I don't see how you get rid of a guy where you have that could play 3 different spots.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. He's valuable.
It just makes 0 sense to me. I don't understand this Brunskill's on the bubble spot. To me, he's like Traylon Burks. He's like NWI. He's like Chig Okonkwo. There's people that think that Chig Okonkwo may not even make the roster. I guess some article got written that he may not even make it. I don't know what these people are smoking. But let me say this. Chig's making the roster. Traylon Burks is making the roster. Daniel Brunskill's making the roster. I mean, this offensive line room is pretty cemented in my head for the most part. I think Duncan is the most on-the-bubble guy that you have on the roster right now. And that's okay. Like, I think that there is something to be said about Duncan maybe spending some time on the practice squad and developing there as well. I think that's a good path for him to take as well. But at the end of the day, Brunskill's making this team. They have $24 million in cap space, so they don't need to cut him to gain $3 million in cap. Like, big whoop. What are you going to do with that $3 million that you couldn't do elsewhere? So in my mind, Brunskill's making this team. I have him as a lock. What about you?
Yeah, I do too. And I've been on record. I know Mike and I are kind of on team no Brunskill, but that's just in terms of him being like the starting right guard at this point. Like, you look at this offensive line room, I think he's probably, I don't know. I think he might be their 5th or 6th best offensive lineman at this point, and he can play multiple positions. He's got obvious experience at right guard. I think his best fit is a center for this team moving forward, where you've got a little bit of insurance, but I think he can be that swing lineman, that 6th man that the Titans have had historically, that can come in a pinch and play just about wherever you need them and can hold the fort down quite a bit. So I don't know. I saw the Chigakonkwo bubble talk, which I thought was crazy. And Reddit actually suckered me into actually commenting on that because somebody shared that article and was like, "Why is everybody so down on Chig?" And I'm like, people in the building ain't that down on Chig. Like y'all falling for this stuff right here. But I didn't see the Brunskill bubble talk, but that's crazy to
Makes
me
no
because
sense.
it's a
I
guy
mean,
that can do so many
starting,
things.
if you want to argue whether he's a starter or not, I mean, I think he can be a legitimate starter in the NFL. And then what I mean by legitimate is an average starter. So he
Yeah.
can be that. But like we said, he has such a diverse portfolio when it comes to his experience in multiple different spots and his ability to play at multiple different spots. It just doesn't it doesn't make sense to me. Like I feel like some people are just writing to write, I guess, at this
Yeah.
point. We have a question from Trey, NPF question mark, and our next topic after this is how secure is NPF's grip on right tackle? Um, I think that when you talk about this team thinks very highly of NPF, or at least they're putting on a show, at least that they are. I look at it and I go, okay, he knows what he has to fix, right? We know that he struggles with the interior pass rush no matter what side he's on. If you rush on the inside of him, he's going to fail to pick you up. We know that he struggles with other stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
we know clearly what his struggles are at right tackle and even at left tackle. But how can you fix it without having reps? And yes, training camp is coming up, but this is where I struggle to believe that he's going to be able to take what he's learned in the classroom and put it out on the field. Now, hopefully he does because he has good pedigree. He's obviously, highly touted when he was getting recruited. I mean, he was a third round pick and worth being a third round pick. There's so many question marks that surround NPF from an availability standpoint, from an ability standpoint. And I look at it and we've seen the best of NPF his rookie year as
Yes.
certain games, right?
Yes.
We've seen what he could be. He's not a all-pro, Pro Bowl right tackle. We have seen him be able to be a slightly above average right tackle his rookie year.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen that since because I mean he was suspended, then he got injured, and we haven't seen him out there this year. He's been inside rehabbing, all this kind of stuff. But at some point, reps matter. And John Ojukwu has gotten a lot of reps at right tackle. And we haven't heard anything bad, but we did get a message from our boy JT, who was out there, producer JT of the Hot Read podcast, who was out there. And he said that he is buying a ticket for the Ojukwu Express.
All aboard,
and
baby.
You are the conductor of the Ojukwu Express. So try to put your bias aside a little.
Yes. Yes.
How secure in your mind is NPF's job on that? How secure is that grip on the right tackle spot?
Man, I don't think it's very secure at all. And I think John Ojukwu certainly complicates things because we are hearing a lot of really good stuff out of the mini camps about him. And I think he's a guy that I liked when they signed him as an undrafted free agent. I'm not really surprised by it. I think this is how opportunities open up in the NFL, man. You've got a spot, you seize the moment kind of deal. It feels like too much of the conversation, in my opinion, is leaning on that and saying, oh, well, NPF, he's way behind John Ojukwu getting all these reps. But take John Ojukwu out of the equation for a minute, Zach. We're not talking enough about the fact that NPF has missed a lot of football in the last season.
Right.
And it's not just that he's getting behind John Ojukwu, but that he's also coming back from an injury. So it kind of feels like he's behind the 8 ball to begin with. And now you've got a guy that is in there and he hasn't shit the bed. In fact, he's drawing praise from a lot of the coaches and he's looking good according to a lot of the media that's out there. And now it's a double whammy. And while before all this started, I would have said his job's pretty secure because he's just got to worry about getting healthy and beating out Jalen Duncan and Dylan Radens at the time. I don't feel that way anymore. It's still like, or I feel worse now because John Ojukwu is doing so good, but the box you still check first is getting healthy and getting reps in. Just get used to playing football again. Even how many games did he miss from the gambling suspension? 4?
6.
6. Yeah. So even that chunk when he wasn't hurt, he's missed a lot of reps. And that to me is the bigger issue that puts him even further behind, because now not only do you got to get back up to speed, your normal play speed and strength, but now you've also got a guy that's far ahead of you that you got to catch up with him too. So I think the odds are stacked against NPF. I saw Trey drop in the comments. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a surprise cut candidate. Don't know that I'm willing to go that far yet, but I think he's closer to that bubble than we're acknowledging right now.
Yeah, I think he's closer to the bubble than Brunskill is, and I think because I
Yes.
think what's
Yes.
happened is that people aren't letting it the information we are receiving and how it affects a player change their opinion at the outset. Because like it was kind of
Yeah.
like Bill Callahan's here. NPF is obviously at this point, after the draft, NPF is your right tackle. So NPF is going to
Mhm.
be the right tackle no matter what. He's the starter. Well, they have said that it's an open competition. It is a battle. They have said we'll see when the pads come on. And maybe when the pads come
Yeah.
on, John Ojukwu doesn't shine and NPF does. Maybe Jalen Duncan takes a big step forward when the pads come on because he has an athletic advantage or something. So to me, I look at it and I go, NPF is a guy that needs reps.
Yes.
He's in a new system.
Mhm.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who played a lot of zone in college, played a lot of zone in the pros, that's going to gap.
That's
Okay.
another obstacle.
Right. And so he's got to learn an entirely new scheme. There's a difference between I can watch a video that tells me here's the steps you need to do to rip out your wire kitchen cabinet racks and put in some floating wood shelves. I can watch
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
I can see it. I understand it. I see what I'm filming. I could say it right back to you. Then when you start getting into the process of going to buy the lumber, buying the tools, going into your garage and staining, and then taking the wire racks out, then measuring and doing all this stuff, you end up crying. Okay. You end up
Yeah.
in the floor of your kitchen crying. And this
Yeah.
is a real story saying you can't fucking do it anymore. And you end up doing it. You figure it out. You pull yourself together. But that took a day and a half to 2 days to do
Or a lot of
and
money.
he is way behind, right? He's way
Yeah.
more behind
Yeah.
than anybody cares to admit. And to me, I'm looking at it and I'm going, man, John Ojukwu, he's getting the reps, he's getting the coaching, he's getting the experience, he's learning how to move Big Bertha and Olga, and he's learning different techniques and all this kind of stuff. And meanwhile, NPF is just getting preached to.
Yeah.
Like he's just watching a video. And listen,
Doing homework.
maybe there's stuff they're doing in there where they're doing hand techniques and all this kind of stuff. But you talk about a guy whose job is not secure on that offensive line. Sadiq Charles, secure at right guard. I'm looking over here at an NPF and I'm like, I don't even think his job is as secure as Sadiq Charles.
Yeah.
And
I don't either.
listen, we'll see when the pads come on. We'll see if they stick with the current right tackle rotation. If they decide that maybe we do slide Radens over. We'll see. But I want to talk about JC Latham because you brought it up earlier because we have two last things I want to talk about. It's Latham and Skoronski.
Okay.
And I want to talk about JC Latham in the sense that you brought it up earlier, but I cannot think of a first round pick in a very, very long time for the Tennessee Titans and I'm including Marcus in this, that has done everything right from since being drafted all the way through to now the summer break. Everything that JC Latham has said, done, has been talked about, stories, all that kind of stuff, is the bizarro Isaiah Wilson. Like he is the anti-Wilson. I think this has been for a very long time one of the better first round picks the Tennessee Titans have already made. And I just don't see how it can't pay dividends.
Yeah.
Like this isn't a nice guy situation, right?
No.
This is I am bigger, stronger than everybody else. And I would say, yeah, Duck Falling is the only guy I can really think of that's like really comes to mind is Javon Curse. And that's a long time ago. So
Mhm.
I like to keep things in like a 10-year window for the most part when I'm talking. But like JC Latham, I mean, we're talking, I'm impressed. It makes me want to buy a jersey. I won't, but it makes
Ooh,
me want to buy a jersey.
man. How
Now,
many jerseys
on
you
top
got?
of that, one.
You
That's
not a big
Derek Jeter.
jersey guy. Yeah.
No,
My
jerseys are most uncomfortable thing ever.
I'm with you.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think they're not for
But
fans. They're not comfortable.
but JC Latham's got you there. You're not a jersey
He's getting
guy.
me close.
Oh,
And
man, I
listen,
love it.
I'll be honest. I talked about it in the piece I wrote today. I wasn't the biggest JC Latham during the season when I'm just watching the games, not the all 22s. I wasn't the biggest JC Latham fan.
Yeah.
It's really hard to focus on offensive linemen if you're just watching game film and you're not going in to analyze it, because I'm not. I'm just going in to enjoy the game as an Alabama fan.
Sure.
And then you get into the all 22 and you're like, whoa, JC Latham is pretty fucking awesome. Like you
He's
get into
floating.
it and you're like, he is moving, he's athletic, he's moving people, he's big and strong, and a lot of the problems that he suffered, or it was really mainly probably more of the scheme and the quarterback. So
Yeah.
I'm really been impressed, and I know you are too. But I mean, JC Latham, if he does not pan out, and I'm not saying that he has to be a Pro Bowler year one, an All Pro year one, or anything like that, but if he doesn't pan out, that will be the biggest miss that I could ever think of as far as what he has done so far versus what he should be.
It'll be a real surprise if he doesn't pan out. That's how
A real
much
gut punch.
clout he's built up over the offseason. I think he's running for president. I think he's got a team in his ear that's just like, hey, buddy, this is what you got to do. And he's just hitting all the boxes. Like he's been coached up on how to win this entire market, this fan base, this city over. It's uncanny, man. Like everything you hear about him is great. And I think I was a big fan. Again, like you watch the games live and it's hard to decipher offensive linemen who's really doing well and who isn't. But when you get into the all 22, it's like that. It takes 2 reps and then you're suddenly like, this dude is different from everybody else on the field. And then you realize why he switched to right tackle instead of left tackle. It wasn't a demotion. It was to help the team because they had a guy at left tackle. They couldn't move to right tackle, all this stuff. The more you learned about him, the more you watched him, the more you fell in love with him. As a prospect, he's a solid pick. But then to see him get to camp and to hear the coaches rave about how seriously he's taking everything, and they're having to drag his ass off the field in the thunderstorm and that sort of thing. To see,
Well, someone yesterday was getting interviewed and he's in the background working.
yeah, it's wild. And then to see the tangible improvement of that first rep he had against the blocking sled, Olga or Bertha, whichever one, that first rep to now he's out there just manhandling the thing. That is what we call tangible improvement. And if he keeps that going and this attitude, this fire inside is legit and it doesn't burn out and he stays healthy and he stays strong, there's no reason to think this can't be a Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackle.
Yeah, I'm with you. Speaking of a guy that got drafted highly last year, it's Peter Skoronski. And to me, he kind of plays into this Will Levis kind of deal where I'm like, it's put up or shut up this year, right? Like
Yeah.
you got your left tackle, you got your center, you got a better scheme, you got better weapons around you. And yes, I know that the weapons don't really matter for an offensive lineman, but they do matter as far as how a defense is deployed and how much pressure he has to take on. He was drafted 11th overall last year. He was drafted with the idea surrounding him and the narrative surrounding him being that he was the best offensive lineman in that class,
Sure.
that he was probably a Pro Bowl tackle, all pro guard. And again, he doesn't have to get to the all pro this year, but we have to see Skoronski take that next big leap. He cannot have a middling year. He has to show why he was taken in the 11th round. And we have to see him. He's put on all the weight. He's done all the good things that you want to do. He's smart. We got to see a little bit more power from him. That's always been an issue. But at this point, he has to show that he was worthy of the first round pick. And yes, I get that's year 2, but he has to trend in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I do still have all pro aspirations for Peter Skoronski, but he's going to have to show that he is on his way to getting there this year.
I think a common theme that we've talked about this offseason quite a bit, the idea that offensive linemen rarely come out strong out the gate their rookie seasons and just have those Pro Bowl, all pro caliber years. So I think there was a growth trajectory for Skoronski to begin with, but then you factor in like the emergency appendectomy, the health issues, compounding that, and he still had the season that he did. I mean, I'm not saying 2023 was a Pro Bowl year for Peter Skoronski, but I think if you watch his tape down the stretch, you see a guy that has qualities to latch onto. You see a reason to have hope that he can be that guy. And now he's coming to the offseason. He's beefed up quite a bit. I kind of, when we did our video on the run game scheme for stacking the inbox, I was watching Bill Callahan's Cleveland Browns offensive line, the way they were pulling Wyatt Teller and Joel Bitonio, and knowing how athletic Big Meat Pete is, just seeing him out on the move, popping guys. I think that's going to elevate his game a little bit. I'm salivating at the opportunity with his athleticism, with his technique, his ability. And again, like we talked about with Lloyd Cushenberry at center, the fact that he's not going to require a lot of help because the supporting cast around him should be better. And he's a guy that you can trust to reliably execute upon his assignment. I see no reason to think that we can't get an all-pro caliber year from Peter Skoronski. It's like you said, it's just a matter of taking the steps and putting the reps on the field.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we just got to see Skoronski do it. When the pads come on, the offensive line shows a lot more warts than what you hear about now. So we'll see what true progress has been made once training camp starts and we get in about a week to 2 weeks of practice. Because last year, Arden Key was beating everybody like a drum.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was indicative of what happened throughout the year, was that the offensive line was getting beat like a drum. So it'll be interesting to see how the defense is able to penetrate against this offensive line and all that. We talked about depth earlier. We can't get out of here without talking about multi-time All-Pro and future Hall of Famer Dylan Radins. Dylan Radins is a guard. I just wanted to get that out there. Dylan Radins is a guard. Yeah. He's a backup guard. I am trusting that Bill Callahan knows more about offensive linemen than the people who think that he made Nick Bosa move.
Yeah, and I think yeah, I'm sorry that caught me. I was preparing my thought and then that came out of left field and got me. I think Radins could also be an interesting spot at left guard too, because we talk about the fall off from Skoronski to Cole Spencer. And I think Radins is an important guy to have along that offensive line as well, because I think he could be a backup at both guard spots and kind of alleviate the need for a more established presence there too. So, but yes, he's a guard.
I was laughing during your Skoronski stuff because Barstool Sports has put up a clip from Bussin' with the Boys where Randall Cobb gives his secret to having all boys. So I would definitely encourage everybody to go get his sex advice if you're looking to have kids and want all boys and no girls. Apparently, he got this from James Jones. They're talking about Will Compton only has 6 pumps in him, if that tells you maybe where this is going. So make sure you go check that out over at Barstool Sports. Real quick, I wanted to talk about Marcus May real quick. He 31 years old, chose to sign with the Dolphins because he wanted to be a contender, aka they paid me the most money.
Yes.
He has barely played games, and everybody's going crazy about Marcus May, which has led to Elijah Molden slander, which is about my least favorite type of slander out there.
Yeah, sure.
Now listen, Justin Simmons is better than Elijah Molden. If Justin Simmons were signed, you'd be talking about having the best secondary in the league. So don't get me wrong when I say this. But Elijah Molden is a capable starter. This idea that he is not a capable starter is wild.
Yeah.
This idea that he's injury prone is even more wild because, yes, he was injured for all of 2022. And listen, who the fuck wasn't, right? Like who the hell wasn't in 2022 injured? He had issues. We know that medical staff wasn't really that great with rehabilitation and getting people out onto the field in an appropriate manner. And I look at it, And I'm thinking, well, he only missed 3 other games the other 2 seasons. Nobody talks about that. Everybody just
Yeah.
assumes he's injury prone because of 1 year, and
Mhm.
he's only missed 3 other games. So I'm kind of sick of this Elijah Molden slander,
I'm
and
with
I
you.
think it's and I'm going to go as far as say it's irresponsible if you slander Elijah Molden. You want to slander the depth behind Molden, okay with it. If you want to slander Mike Brown, Anthony Kendall, or Shaheem Carter, all for it. I'm all for bringing in Tracy Walker or Eddie Jackson. I don't think
Yeah.
either of them are going to beat out, Elijah Molden, really. I mean, Eddie Jackson may, but this idea that Elijah Molden is not good and not healthy to be able to be relied upon is a farce, and it's irresponsible coverage.
Yeah, and I think it's also possible too, like, we kinda fixate on these veteran safeties thinking, "Oh, the Titans want a starter," but I don't know if anybody's has anybody asked Rand or Brian Callahan specifically if they want a starter opposite Amani Hooker, or are they just concerned about the depth? Because the names you mentioned beyond Molden are all like second year rookie undrafted free agent types. Like, it makes sense to want a veteran in that room alongside Amani Hooker, whether the guy's starting or not. And I like Molden. I think he's a really tough player. He's a tone setter. I think he plays really well to what's in front of him. He closes on almost had an all-time audible typo. I don't know what you call it coming out of your mouth, but I think he's really good closing on tackles. I think he's instinctive. I think he plays hard, he runs hard, he's a feisty guy. And I think being moved to safety where maybe he's not going to be asked to cover guys one-on-one as much, and maybe he can be a little more rangy than the press guy at the line of scrimmage. I think it benefits him, man. Like, I think he can have a good season. And I honestly don't think it's the end of the world if he ends up starting next to Amani Hooker.
Yeah, the problem is the depth. If you want to, like I said, if you want to attack the depth, but you're talking about a guy that was feisty his rookie year, who everybody expected to take a big leap the following year, who played and learned a new position last year after they shipped off Kevin Byard, rightfully so,
Yeah.
and he performed better than Byard. So, yes, I get that the Tennessee Titans are looking to upgrade over Molden, right? I mean, they obviously had shown interest in Justin Simmons,
Yeah.
which was reported on about Diana. They showed interest in Marcus May as well. But if they really had real interest, or let me put it to you this way. They would have outbid the Miami Dolphins if they thought that they had to have Marcus May.
Yeah.
They
And
would
that's
have already signed Justin Simmons at whatever price he is asking if they thought that they desperately needed Justin Simmons.
yeah.
And like I said earlier, we both agree Justin Simmons is better than Elijah Molden. But again, we're talking about safety, which safety is increasingly becoming a less important position. You don't have to spend a lot of money at safety.
Right.
And Elijah Molden is a perfectly acceptable starter at safety. He's not good as Justin Simmons. I think he's better than Marcus May, at least more reliable. And listen, Justin Simmons, maybe his price comes down because that's the only reason Justin Simmons is likely still on the market. His price is a little down.
Yeah.
And maybe they bring in Justin Simmons, right? Like, I'm okay with that move. If that's what they feel that move needs, I'm in. He's better than Elijah Molden. But there's something to be said for not outbidding, and I'm sure Marcus's May contract is not that, like, it's not like a $10 million contract, right? I mean, we're talking about
Mhm.
probably a Tyler Boyd-esque contract. And they didn't want to pay it because they're kind of comfortable with what they got
Yeah.
at starter.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. So I kind of look at it and I go, I still think they sign a safety.
Mhm.
I still hope that it's Justin Simmons, right? Because Justin Simmons makes the team better.
It's a good player.
But everybody else is just depth. I think Elijah Molden could beat out everybody else because I think Justin Belcher was the
Oh, I
one who
do
said
too.
it earlier up in the chat. I think he fits Denard Wilson, what he's looking for, what he wants. I think he fits what Denard Wilson needs. And the corners will make the safety better. The corners make everything better, except for maybe linebacker. They make everything better. And so I do think that they need more safety depth. And why I want Justin Simmons, I don't think they necessarily have to or need Justin Simmons.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think their actions reflect that. This is not a desperation situation where they're going to be overpaying just to get a guy into camp. And I think that's the part that people are kind of sleeping on right now, is that they probably feel that way because, just guessing here, they probably feel comfortable. Like, okay, worst case scenario, our starter is Elijah Molden, and we've got nothing behind him and Hooker. Like, okay, we can figure that out as we go. But I think the fact that they haven't made it a point to really go out and grab one of these guys indicates that at the worst case scenario, they're still okay with Molden being the guy.
And whether that's the right move or not, you'll see. You'll see what Justin Simmons signs for wherever he may sign, whether that's with the Titans, and then you'll be able to gauge and then see what he does, whatever team signs him. We'll see. We don't know if it's the right decision, but these people that act like they have to do something, we've heard it from Coach Mack many times. This team does not have to do anything.
Yep.
You want them to do it. That's really what it boils down to me, is that people want Justin Simmons. And I'm okay with that. I'm not here to say that you're an idiot for wanting Justin Simmons. But don't act like they have to do it. Because at the end of the day, they are at a position where they can, wait, right? They can try to play out the safety market. They're at that point where they can do that. And that's the whole point of free agency. And right now, Rand has done a good job of waiting the market out. It's how he got Tyler Boyd so cheap, right? He waited the market out.
Yeah.
So again, with Justin Simmons, you can wait the market out. Marcus May signing was just like, okay, well, they're on Justin Simmons' watch. Like, well, we're on Justin Simmons' watch. Not necessarily the Titans are, but we are on Justin Simmons' watch. For fans, for media members, it's Justin Simmons or bust. But if they don't get Justin Simmons, I'm perfectly fine with trotting out Elijah Molden. The problem is, if Elijah Molden or Imani Hooker go down with an injury, the guys behind them, that's when you have the issue.
I still kind of like the idea of moving Gabe Jeudy-Lally over to safety too. I mean, they might need him at corner, but I think he could thrive in that spot too.
And listen, we talk. Keaton Ellis is a guy that we haven't really talked a lot about, but I highlighted Keaton Ellis in my pick. He's got similar situations surrounding him as Geno Stone did when Denard Wilson was able to get Geno Stone's a bunch of interceptions last year. It'll be interesting. At this point, I have no reason not to trust the process of the coaches. I have no reason not to trust that Bill Callahan thinks that Radins is a guard, because Radins is a guard. I have no problem that they think that they are very happy with Caleb Farley's progress. I have no problem that they are really ecstatic with Gabe Jeudy-Lally. I at this point, we have no reason. You could be skeptical. I personally have no reason not to trust this coaching staff process. So if they feel that it's not smart or prudent to overspend or outbid someone else for Marcus May, or if they choose not to spend a lot of money on Justin Simmons because they feel that the difference between what Justin Simmons is right now and Elijah Molden does not necessitate spending that amount of money, whatever that may be, it's a little bit different. And right now, the coaches are kind of directing and telling Rand Carthon what he's looking for, what they want, what they need. We'll see some turnaround, right? Bill Callahan obviously said, okay, I think we need to pick up Jerron Christian. And maybe we will get a safety signing. And maybe that safety signing will say more about the depth. So at this point, that's where I'm at on the Marcus May stuff. Everybody else wanted to do red alert, pull the lever, abandon ship, all this stuff over Marcus freaking May, who played 10 games last year.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break on this Marcus May. Some people are just looking for reasons to be mad at Rand Carthon. That's kind of where I'm at on that.
We've talked about that plenty on these shows that we do.
That will do it for us. StackingInbox.com, SoBrosNetwork.com. One more thing. I should have closed out at 10 minutes ago for you to get your one more thing.
What did you make of Hayden's question earlier? Do we still wish Olu was the pick at 7? Are we on board with Latham?
No. I mean, I think we would see similar stuff from Olu Fashanu that we're seeing from JC Latham, but not. I have been thoroughly impressed with JC Latham. A lot more impressed than I thought I would be. I understood the pick at the time. I trust Bill Callahan, but I mean, even J.C. Latham himself has thrusted himself past that. And I have one more thing for you after
Okay.
you answer.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, after watching more of Bill Callahan's run game with Cleveland, I think Latham's the better fit. I think I would flip-flop on that one. I think I get it, and I'm happy with the Latham pick.
Got two
Over
questions just real
Olu.
quick.
Okay.
Okay, we got to ask something about Kenneth earlier today. And besides Bill Callahan, what's the best assistant coach hire? Not including coordinators. So best assistant coach hire. And
Okay.
then secondly, what did you think of Randy Jordan specifically calling out Hassan Haskins as part of the 3 running backs and as the enforcer?
I did not like it because I feel like we're we're giving life to the Hassan Haskins hype train a little bit, and I am not a fan. But man, listen, Braden's been on it on a football show. He has said like we shouldn't rule him out just yet, and it's a fear of mine. But then I remind myself RB3
There are worse
usage.
things like Jack Gibby starting at linebacker.
Yeah. Like the RB3 usage in this offense, I don't think is going to be very high. So I probably shouldn't worry about it. I'm still Team Dylan
Likes
Johnson,
are
though.
officially private, by the way. So
How
I
about
just
that?
got a notification on Twitter. Olu can't run block, kind of important. Run blocking's not important. You can coach run blocking. You can't teach pass blocking. Every offensive line coach will tell you that. And this is a passing league. So I just want to throw that out there, Chef Ren. That's a variable line of thinking. Run blocking's not that important. Who's your favorite assistant coach hire for Kenneth?
Man, I really like the Tyke Tolbert hire. I liked it at the time, and like seeing how obsessed everybody is with Jaquan Jackson throughout the mini camp so far, seeing the work that the receivers are putting in, like we're getting Mason Kinsey hype videos again. Oh no, I spoke it into existence. I shouldn't have said that. But you know, we're seeing like the results out there. I like that was just immediately where my gut went to. But I liked a lot of the hires. I liked Bo Hardegree as well. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go with Tyke
I'm
Tolbert.
going a different routes, kind of cheating, kind of not. Justin Naughton being a tight end coach, I
Oh
think is going
yeah,
to make a huge, huge difference for the tight ends, for the young tight ends, but also just for the overall tight end room itself. I really love what he did at Green Bay. It's why he got the job over at Denver. Then it's why that his production at Denver is why he got the job over here.
yep,
I really like that they kept Justin Naughton. I do like they kept Chris Harris as well. And I think the way that they are coaching, Denard Wilson's coaching his defense is more conducive to what Chris Harris likes to do from his time at Washington.
yep.
So that was a big thing, is that Shane Bowen did not, Shane Bowen's style, Chris Harris's style did not mesh. So that'll do it for us. Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee, for over 50 years. Cocktails, mocktails, beers, CBD drinks, beer, liquor, wine. It doesn't matter. They have snacks. They got salty snacks. They have it all. They even have water and hangover cures. So go over to Bluegrass Beverages and get all your stuff from Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. For Stoney, I'm Zach, stackingthinbox.com, SoberRoseNetwork.com. Like, review, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We appreciate you. This has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.